been some more outside. And as always, if you have any questions, you can throw those in the comments. If you've had any sightings you want to add, put those in the comments, absolutely. Or you can just say hi. Today at the birdhouse, we do have birds of prey from Wild Wings that are here from right now from 10 o'clock until noon. So that's always fun. And starting Monday, we have our photo contest going on. So that begins Monday morning, right as we open at 10 o'clock. You can submit any 2 photos you want throughout any of a mix of the categories we have, which are birds, wildlife, scenery. We even have a pet category now. So you can enter 2 photos, 8 by 10 printouts. You submit those to the store, and the contest is totally free to enter. And if you win, you can get a $100 gift certificate or a $50 gift certificate, depending on if you get first or second place. And we do have prizes in each category. So it's not just one winner. We give out lots of different gift certificates for all the different winners. So as always, you can say hi or you can post your sightings in the comments and we'll get started. You guys have been sending in lots of fun photos. We're still getting reports of bluebirds that are nesting. So if you have bluebird boxes out, don't be surprised if you've just seen a brood fledge. So if you've just seen the young leave the nest, bluebirds here can have up to 3 broods a year. So you might still be getting some more activity throughout the season at your bluebird house. We're starting to get those questions about when do certain birds migrate, and you might see some less activity from certain birds at your feeders or increased activity from certain birds at your feeders due to this migration activity. With at least here in New York, a lot of them do migrate and will go a little bit further south for the winter. They don't go all the way down to Central or South America, but they will go a little bit further south, more to, Pennsylvania or even down to the Carolinas for some warmer weather. However, some of them do stay here all year round. So while you might have some migration activity, you might have your bluebirds all year round. So be on the lookout for bluebirds. They're definitely still around and they're raising their young right now. And here's another photo of a bluebird here sent in by Bob. Looks like on a sumac tree there. Red-eyed vireo, definitely lots of red-eyed vireo being reported. Very, very chatty in the trees, in the woods. To me, they sound like a robin, but kind of less of a sing-songy type of call. If you get close enough to them, you can see that the adults do have that bright red eye, so that's how they get their name. And I'll play you their call here. It almost sounds like they're talking to themselves. They'll have a little note, and then there's a pause, and then there's another note, then they pause. So this is the red-eyed vireo, and I'm playing this from the Merlin ID app, which I love. So they're pretty chatty and they'll sing all summer long. So this is going to be a migratory bird that we won't have here all winter, and they'll start to piddle out in the fall. But they are here all summer and they are quite chatty all season long. So be on the lookout for them. And speaking of vireos and speaking of just young birds in general, when birds first leave the nest, there are a lot of different dangers for them. They're first navigating the world. And one of them, one of the big ones that they do face are window strikes. And here's a photo sent in by Bob who says, had a window strike with this young vireo. He was on his back initially, but breathing with a parent or sibling next to him. I checked on him, held him for a bit, but since he looked okay, just dazed, I placed him on my generator where he would be safe and parents could easily reach him. Been sitting with his eyes closed. Poor little dude. Yeah, lots of birds do have these window strikes. They're kind of navigating their outside world. They see through the glass. They don't realize that there is some kind of a barrier there, and they do hit it. And that can cause a lot of things like this, where they get stunned. Sometimes it can cause death, so it can cause some pretty big fatalities for young birds, unfortunately. There are some things you can do to help limit window strikes. You can put window decals on your window, and that will just show that there's some kind of a barrier there in between the outside world and the inside world. So it just helps them see the glass better. These are our best sellers, and I'll kind of zoom in on this here so you can see why. Um, how these work are they are decals you put on the outside of your window, and there's different shapes, although you don't really see the shapes too much. The decals themselves almost look clear to our eye. So to the human eye, they're pretty clear. You can see that there's something there, but they really don't impede the vision through your window. But they reflect UV light, and birds can see in the UV spectrum. So it reflects that UV light, and the birds can see that there's some kind of a window there. So that's one thing that you can put up. And that's common this time of the year. It's also common. The window strikes are common now with the young ones. It's also common when the birds are migrating through and they're migrating into the area, and they're not super familiar with where they're going. We hear about window strikes a lot then as well. So here's those photos sent in by Bob of a unfortunate window strike, which does happen quite often. Some other warblers that have been seen around, we're hearing lots of reports of common yellowthroat, of yellow warbler, of black and white warbler. So there are still warblers out and about. They're not as singing, as loud and singing as they were earlier in the season, but they're definitely still around. And here's a photo sent in by Bob, who said, I also added some photos of that yellow warbler looking bird that has a pinkish beak, size of a warbler, and definitely moved like a warbler. So this is a possible yellow warbler. It looks quite a bit like one. It's hard to exactly say, especially when they're in their juvenile plumage. But here's another warbler photo sent in by Bob. And not a warbler, but sometimes you'll see them in the same type of habitat or even kind of together, are scarlet tanagers. And scarlet tanagers will be here through, the late summer, early fall. This is a female scarlet tanager, excuse me, not summer tanager, scarlet female is yellow, and she's got a black colored wing. And the males, if you're lucky enough to see a male, they are bright red with that black wing. So scarlet tanagers are still here. People are reporting them around as well. They're not really going to come to a feeder. Sometimes they'll come to bird baths, especially if there's some kind of a fountain feature or moving water on the bird bath, or if you have a pond with a water feature that moves the water, that can bring in a lot of the scarlet tanager, but they really don't come to feeders. Every once in a while, we hear of them coming to mealworm feeders or eating sunflower hearts. So you never know, but most likely you're going to see them kind of jumping around in trees in the forest. So that is the beautiful scarlet tanager. Some birds that you guys have been reporting, the killdeer. Mark sent in a whole bunch of photos here of some different birds, killdeer being one of them. They are still around. They're a type of shorebird that you can sometimes find even in your backyards or front yards if you're in new development and there's wide open spaces. You're not going to really find these in a forested area where there's a lot of trees, because they do like that wide open space. So definitely around water and ponds, be on the lookout for killdeer. And Chris had sent in these photos of not only an adult killdeer, but with a couple of youngsters. So there are the young out there now as well, as far as the killdeer goes. So they are going to be a fairly large shorebird, and they've got two stripes that go on their across their neck and almost to their breast there. You can see it here really well with the killdeer in flight, and that's a really good way to identify them. So you might even see them in parking lots. They're known to be in parking lots and to nest in parking lots. So they're definitely out and about in the area. And juvenile red-bellied woodpeckers, we've been getting one of those behind the store almost all day, every day, feeding on our suet feeder. And they're going to be about the same size as the adult. They have that speckled black and white on their back, but most of the time they're lacking all the red on the back of their head. So that'll grow in as they get older. And here's a picture sent in by Stacy that shows that, where you've got this large woodpecker, but it still doesn't have all of its coloration yet. So that's really common right now. You'll see that with not only the red-bellied woodpeckers, but you'll see that with flickers. If you've got downy woodpeckers or hairy woodpeckers, they might not have the red on the back of their head yet. Super common because they are just growing into their plumage. And hummingbirds. So people are starting now to see more hummingbirds than I've heard of all season long. So all of a sudden, people are starting to get lots and lots of hummingbirds. So if you gave up earlier in the season, which I kind of did, I got rid of my nectar feeders and I put out my humbug feeder because I've got all my plants out that are in bloom, that's going to be enough for them. I'm putting my nectar feeder back out because so many people have been just this past week reporting hummingbirds. So probably has something to do with the young are starting to leave the nest. They're out and exploring. And the birds, the adults and the juveniles, both are starting to get more calories in them and starting to get ready for that migration south. So they're usually here through Labor Day or so. So they do have some time still to be here, but they will start to bulk up and they'll be drinking more nectar and getting more calories in order to build up that fat for that long migration all the way down to Mexico and to Central America. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden you're seeing more hummingbirds coming to your feeders. And we have had people come in just this past week who haven't had a hummingbird all season long, and all of a sudden they're getting them, and they're getting them very, very often. So pretty exciting. That's probably the biggest news that we've had all during this past week. And here's a couple more photos sent in by Bob. Here's two hummingbirds here together, which is something you don't see all too often. I'm wondering if these are two juveniles that maybe just left the nest. They usually have a nest of anywhere between 1 and 3 birds, but usually it's 2. And this could be the 2 young ones that have left. And orioles. Orioles are still around. Some people are getting them throughout the day, really, really often, coming to the jelly, coming to the mealworms. Other people are saying, I'm not getting any, or they've seen some up in the trees, but they're not really active at the feeders. So keep your eyes out for orioles. They might be fizzling at your feeders, but they are also getting ready for their migration. So they might be coming back to get more calories and to get ready for their migration. And they usually leave, it seems, a little bit earlier than the hummingbirds. So they'll probably be here for a couple more weeks or so before they start that migration south. That even if the birds you've had in your yard all season have flown south, there's going to be some from further up north that are passing through the area that could come through your yard as well, even after that peak migration time. So we should still see orioles for another 2 or 3 weeks or so with some regularity in backyards. Here's another oriole photo here sent in by Bob. So lots of people are still getting orioles, and some people are still going through jelly like mad, and other people said, they've kind of fizzled. Indigo bunting are still around. You might see these at your seed feeders coming to Niger seed, or again, the sunflower hearts. And if you're looking to give the birds some kind of a seed, but you don't want all the mess, especially during the summer, you don't want all the shells, you don't want one other thing to do, besides putting up something like a suet feeder, which is super simple and really doesn't make a mess, the next best thing you could do is the sunflower hearts. The sunflower hearts are awesome because there's really any kind of bird that's going to come to a bird feeder to eat seeds will most likely eat the sunflower hearts. So if you're doing just plain black oil sunflower, sometimes the smaller finches have an issue cracking open the shell with their beaks, but those small birds can easily eat the sunflower hearts because there's no shell on it. So if you're looking for something that doesn't leave a mess, that attracts a lot of birds, sunflower hearts is definitely the way to go. So you'll get a huge diversity of birds and you don't have to worry about the mess. So that's wonderful. And birds like the indigo bunting will eat those as well. So some other birds that are being reported, of course, the tufted titmouse. I saw this photo on Tuesday. This is a cute pose that Bob was able to snap of a tufted titmouse, and then of a blue jay here being surrounded by bugs. If you've spent any time outdoors, you can probably relate to that blue jay. House wrens. So more and more birds are starting to fledge and leave the houses, house wrens included. Love this photo of the 4 little heads sticking out of the house, just about to fledge and leave the nest. Here's another house wren photo sent in by Mark J as well. And then some other birds to be on the lookout for. Cedar waxwings. So cedar waxwings are here all year round. And while they don't typically come to feeders. You're really not going to see them unless you sometimes have a blend that has some kind of a fruit in it, or a suet with some kind of fruits in it. It would be very rare to see a cedar waxwing at your feeder, but they will come to bird baths, and they will come to bushes or trees that have berries on them. That's really the thing that's going to bring them in. And here's a picture of a beautiful cedar waxwing sent in by Mark, and you can see those waxy tips, those little yellow waxy tips on the bottom of its wing there that give them their name. Eastern towhee are still around, and while they tend to be more common in the spring and summer months, some people do report them at or underneath their feeders all year round, including the winter. Eastern towhees are in the sparrow family, even though they don't really look too sparrow-like as far as their coloration. The adults will have that bright red eye. They're black with kind of a chestnut colored side. So they're really different and striking looking bird. And they will come to feeders that have sunflower seeds or sunflower hearts. They'll eat millet as well. So with the towhees, they tend to feed off the ground. But if you have something with large perches, or if you have a nice big open tray feeder, that's your best bet in getting some towhees. And Mark also sent in these photos of some ravens. So he had a neat experience watching some common ravens. He said, walking the trails at Mendon, I saw two ravens possibly courting. They were very vocal and would fly in a tandem. It was fascinating to watch the interactions. So you might be familiar with ravens, but if not, they are going to be larger than our typical crow. So we do have two species of crow, at least here in the upstate New York area. We've got the American crow, which is going to be our most common crow. And then we do have a smaller bird called a fish crow that tends to be found more often by the water, but not all the time. The American crow is quite vocal. Well, they're all pretty vocal. So you've probably heard the call of the American crow, and I'll play that for you now so you can kind of learn the difference between the American crow and the common raven, because the common raven will have a call that's kind of more guttural. So here's the American crow, which you've probably heard in your yard or if you've been outside at all. So that's one of their calls. Let's play another one. So those are some typical American crow calls. Something like a fish crow, which is going to be a smaller crow, will have kind of a more nasally type of call. There are blue jays, which are in the same family as the crows, and they have a whole bunch of different calls, as you're probably aware of if you do any kind of backyard bird feeding. So the raven, though, listen to the call of the raven. The raven is going to be a much bigger bird, which can be hard to tell, though, if they're flying up high or if they're far away. They have a much thicker bill, wider bill, bigger bill, but their calls are going to be much different too. So here's a call of a raven. So it sounds quite a bit different than the American crow. And so Mark was able to get not only some photos of the ravens, but here's a photo of the raven calling, which is pretty cool. And then what could be some courting behavior between the ravens as well. And often birds, larger birds and birds of prey, when they are courting, they will fly together. They'll fly in tandem. Sometimes one will fly above the other. So they will do some of this kind of flying together as a kind of courting ritual. So pretty cool there. Some photos sent in by Mark of common ravens. So really, really neat. And then he also sent in this set of photos, juvenile osprey. So he says, fun sightings from Montezuma yesterday. Adult osprey bringing back dinner for the two juveniles. The juveniles did an early test flight. The juveniles did an early test flight too, and stayed close to the nest, which was neat to see. So here's the young here in the nest. It looks like they're getting big enough. It's almost time for them to leave. And here comes the adult there with a nice fish, and giving it there to the nest of the juveniles. So really neat to watch those osprey. If you ever get a chance to watch them fish, they're pretty neat. And there's a lot of those osprey out in the Montezuma area. So all those big nests, if you go out towards Montezuma and you see all those big nests on the foam poles, most of those are going to be osprey nests, although sometimes other birds will take them over as well. So neat set of photos here taken by Mark of some osprey. And then here's another photo here where this is an osprey getting mobbed by an eastern kingbird, possibly. And it does look like an eastern kingbird here that's going after the osprey. The osprey probably got too close to its nest, and the kingbird is not happy about that. The white stripe on the tip of the tail feathers here on the kingbird is a pretty good identifying characteristic there of that bird. So another neat behavior that was seen. If you're by the water looking for birds, you might see things like the killdeer, which we saw those photos of earlier. There's different sandpiper. Here is a least sandpiper, which is going to be a small one. Mark snapped these photos over at Kings Bend Park and sent those in. And then he's had a great series of photos of these green herons. So here's, it says green heron on the hunt. I absolutely love this photo with the neck just splooshing into the water there. See how long that neck is, which is incredible. The green herons are pretty small, and usually they're kind of, their neck is kind of tucked in, so they look kind of unassuming. But that neck can really stretch in order to grab a fish or to grab a frog or a tadpole. So it's an incredible photo there. And he also sent in these photos of some wood duck. Looks like some juvenile wood ducks there. And some more green heron photos. He says, green heron back at it. Love watching the green heron hunt. And so here's the green heron kind of sneaking through the different little rocks there in order to hunt. And some more green heron photos here. He said, I updated the green heron pictures. The middle picture, I believe, is a juvenile with the stripes on the front, if I'm correct. This was at Kings Bend Park. So here's another green heron on the hunt. And then here looks like the juvenile there, which doesn't have all of its colorful plumage yet. So some more heron photos sent in by Kings Bend Park. So usually we see a lot of blue heron, but this green heron is really fun and a little bit more elusive. So it's always neat to see them kind of out in the open hunting. Lots of goldfinches around. I know if your feeder is anything like my feeder, it is covered in goldfinches recently. They are out and about. They're singing their little hearts out. Karen sent in this photo of the goldfinch that found her pot of mini sunflowers, which I love. The sunflower and goldfinches look amazing on those. I've got one that's starting to fizzle out and go to seed, and I'm already seeing some of the seeds that are being pecked out of that, the head of the sunflower. So it doesn't take the birds very long at all to find those. So if you do have sunflowers in the garden and they're starting to fizzle, you don't want to deadhead them. You want to definitely keep those seed heads out, because the birds will eat those, just like with your coneflower, your black-eyed Susan. That's going to be a lot of good seed material for the birds in your garden. So then we'll move on to the butterfly portion of the program. We shared this photo on Tuesday that Ed sent in of a mystery caterpillar, which was pretty cool. And he had said, I found this large caterpillar crawling around the side of the house the other day. Haven't ID'd it yet. I suspect it's a swallowtail of some sort, but I've never seen one like this color. Usually they're that lime green color. Wondering if it might be a dark morph eastern tiger swallowtail. Love the yellow eyes and blue dots. So yeah, we figured it is a tiger swallowtail caterpillar that's about ready to pupate. So that was pretty exciting. There's lots of tiger swallowtails out there. When we've talked in the past about butterflies and butterfly gardening and having the right plants to attract the caterpillars for these butterflies, the tiger swallowtails tend to like large trees for their host plants, meaning the plants that the butterflies will lay their eggs on. So the eggs can hatch. Those caterpillars will eat those trees, the leaves from those trees, and then they'll be able to pupate. So it's kind of rare to see a tiger swallowtail caterpillar. I've never seen one myself. honestly, because they tend to be high up in the trees where the eggs are laid. But we have some different butterfly books if you are trying to ID some different kind of tricky things. I like this one, The Life Cycle of Butterflies, because it shows each step of the way from what the egg looks like onto the different stages of the caterpillar. Every time they shed their skin, they do look a little bit different most of the time. So I really like this book. It's a good one for your not only butterfly, but your caterpillar identification. So, and then there's, of course, tiger swallowtails. People are reporting tiger swallowtails in their garden. If you see a really big, giant yellow butterfly floating around the garden, it's probably going to be a tiger swallowtail. So pretty common in backyards and in parks, and definitely you'll see them flying around the treetops of deciduous trees where they'll be laying their eggs. And monarch butterflies. So I've started to see more monarch butterflies over the past week or so. So be on the lookout for in your milkweed plants. You might see the butterflies laying their eggs. You might start to see the caterpillars there a little bit more than there were. So monarch butterflies are definitely out and about. This photo was sent in by Bob, who snapped a monarch butterfly photo. And you can see that this is a male. So we did a class earlier last month or late last month or earlier this month, and we were talking about the differences between male and female monarch butterflies. The males have these little scent pouches here on their hind wing. If you look closely, there's a little dot there on the hind wing, and that's how you can identify it as a male. So this is a male monarch butterfly. Here's another photo of a monarch butterfly kind of floating around in the milkweed, probably going to lay its eggs. Some other orange butterflies you might see right now, there are butterflies called fritillaries. Some of them are pretty big, almost the size of monarchs. We've got a couple species that you might see around here pretty commonly. The meadow fritillary is one. There's another called a great spangled fritillary. So if you do see a bright orange butterfly, it might not always be a monarch butterfly. There are different types around here. If you see kind of a smaller orange butterfly, smaller than your typical cabbage white. I like to use cabbage white butterflies as kind of a baseline because they're kind of a medium-sized butterfly and we're all super used to seeing them. Pearl crescent is going to be a little bit smaller than your cabbage white butterfly, but they are around and they feed on their young, or their caterpillars will feed on things like plantains. So they can be kind of common in backyards. So this is the pearl crescent. And then here's some photos that were sent in by Bob, who had some types of fritillaries there on his plants. So hard to tell if it's a meadow fritillary or if it's a great spangled fritillary, or it could be a couple other different species that we do have, but they're definitely around in the area. So lots of fun orange butterflies. And milkweed attracts not only caterpillars, you might find ladybugs on it, you might find insects called giant milkweed, or you might see different caterpillars on it too. These are called milkweed tussock moths, and or milkweed tussock moth caterpillars technically. And so if you see a group of kind of funky looking caterpillars on your milkweed, it's probably going to be these. These are always really cool to see. So they're not a pest by any means. They're just a different native species that we have around here. So if you've got them eating your milkweed, that's a lot of fun too. So I would definitely keep them around. And they show signs, all caterpillars show signs that they are around. So look for, if you're trying to find some monarchs either to raise in your home or to just take a peek at, look for their droppings, because that is the best way to find them. And Lynn sent in this photo here too from her garden of what's most likely a black swallowtail. So there's lots of fun insects out there right now. Lots of birds still out, even though they're kind of quiet. And they're definitely coming to feeders. They're super, super hungry. Some questions we've been getting recently are about the window strikes. So we talked about how you can keep birds from striking the windows with those decals. The best way to feed the birds in the summer without causing a big mess, it's going to be your sunflower hearts, or suet is great because the suet doesn't really leave a lot of a mess. That's a really good thing to do. And if you are starting to attract not only hummingbirds and orioles to your nectar feeders, but bees, now's the time you might want to put up the fake wasp nests. So we have these, they almost look like paper lanterns. I guess it really is a paper lantern, and it mimics a bald-faced hornet's nest. So the idea behind these are that because bald-faced hornets are so territorial and they're so nasty, other bees and wasps tend to stay away from them. So if you hang this by your feeder, the bees and wasps will see that and they'll say, oh, I don't want to go anywhere nearby this. So that is one thing that you can do to help keep them away. And people have had really good success with that. So that's one thing you can do. We've got them packaged in these little packages here. So you just got a whole bunch more in. So we do have those. Another thing people do are to keep bees and wasps away from their feeders is if you make a very sugary solution that instead of being 1 part sugar to 4 parts water is more like 1 part sugar to 1 part water. So super, super sugary, and put it on the ground somewhere far away from your other feeders. That can attract the bees and wasps over there, and it keeps them away from your feeders. So that's another thing you can do, which people have had some pretty good success with. And as far as feeding the young birds, or to possibly try to get some warblers in, you can do the sunflower hearts, of course, or the mealworms. Lots of birds will eat insects. Most of the birds are eating insects right now as their main source of food in their diet. So adding some kind of insect material can really help bring in even more birds. So we have the freeze-dried mealworms. We also have the live mealworms. They do prefer the live mealworms, but if the live mealworms aren't for you, we have plenty of freeze-dried. So those are a lot of the questions we've been getting recently. If you have any more questions, or if you have comments or sightings, absolutely put those in the comments. It looks like we've got some people on here. Mushroom King says, hello, good morning. Bob, who sent in a whole bunch of those photos from today, said, good morning. Quite an uptick in hummingbird activity in recent days, which has been a nice surprise. All right, so Bob is also seeing the uptick in the hummingbird activity. So that's really good to hear. He says some appear to be younger and are very inquisitive and exploring all over. So that's really great news. So if you have taken your hummingbird feeder down and you're kind of over it for the year, I would put it back up at least for the next couple of weeks, because they are seriously going to be tanking up for that migration south. And there's lots of young that are out there exploring the world. So that's a great report there from Bob, who's said the same thing a lot of our customers have been saying this past week. Bob also says, yes, those waxwings love berries along with the catbirds. I think the ones around me are winterberry bushes. So Bob sounds like he gets the cedar waxwings coming to winterberry. Stephanie says, great photos, guys. And Bob says, yes, those waxwings love the berries along with the catbirds. Oh, it's on here twice. Okay. Stephanie says, geez, I thought the starling calls were annoying. Ravens are far worse. Yeah, so Mark had sent in those photos of the ravens showing some different activity and some different some interactions that they're having between each other. And here's a photo of the raven really making its call, and it has that very, very guttural, loud call. So yeah, they are definitely quite vocal, and I love this photo showing them belting out there. Chalk 5 says, I have a lot of trouble getting goldfinch to my yard. The house sparrows tend to eat my Niger before anyone else gets to it. That is a very common issue people have. Really, the only thing you can do to keep sparrows out of your Niger feeder is to get what's called a bottoms up or an upside down Niger feeder, where the feeder ports are above the the perches are above the feeding ports. More like, so the bird will perch on its little stick perch, and then it has to flip over upside down to get to the feeding port. And the goldfinches can do that, but the house sparrows have a difficult time. So that's really the only thing that we have found that will keep them out of the Niger feeders. There's Niger feeders that have mesh on them that the birds have to cling to, but the sparrows can figure that out right away as well. So that doesn't attract them, but having an upside down or what's called a bottoms up bird feeder can help with that house sparrow activity. Lynn says, love the bees, just wish they would leave my jelly and nectar alone. Have to apply peppermint oil twice a day lately, so I'm going to mix it with some Vaseline and apply it underneath. Hopefully this will last longer. Yes, that is another good tip that we have heard from people that peppermint oil. There's something about it that the bees and wasps don't like. So you can apply some of that to your feeder as well, and that will help keep them away. So thank you, Lynn, for that tip. That's another good tip. And Ed says, great photos again this morning. Thanks, Liz, and everyone for sharing. Almost like a preview to the photo contest. Yeah, so that's a good way to wrap it up, where our photo contest does start on Monday. So everyone get your photos ready. The submissions will go through Monday, which is August 15th through September 18th. So it'll run for a little bit over a month. And then we'll have 3 professional judges come in to judge those photos, and then we will divvy out prizes. So it's always a lot of fun. So definitely bring in your photos. We love to see what kind of things you guys have had. And if you've got some free time today, stop into the store. Wild Wings is here right now with some birds of prey, and they will be here until noon. So we have got that going on. And then next Saturday, we have our first ever jigsaw puzzle swap. I know a lot of you guys had not that much to do during the pandemic. We all had a lot of free time on our hands that we don't normally have. And jigsaw puzzles were all the rage. But if you've got a whole bunch and you really don't know what to do with them, and you want to do more, but you don't want to buy more, well, we've got the solution for you. We've got a jigsaw puzzle swap happening for the first time ever next Saturday here at the store from 10 till noon. Bring in your jigsaw puzzles, drop them off, and swap them out for some new ones from some other people who are doing the same. So we'll see how that goes. That should be a fun time. So we've got that going on next Saturday. So we'll be back on Tuesday with another broadcast. Until then, have a great weekend, and we will talk